Hello everybody, and welcome to another astonishing episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is brought to you in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, you can sign up for $1 per month over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below. For this week's video, we're going to be talking a bit about the Microverse, the parallel universe from the comics that has inspired the quantum realm in the films. Now, this isn't going to be a comprehensive video breaking down every little thing there is to know about every Microverse and Micronaut, since we'd be here all day. But we will be looking at some key stories and notable characters as a crash course on Microworlds in general. There are early examples of the concept, including a story from 1943 in which Captain America and Bucky shrink down and visit the atom world of Mita. However, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, perhaps erroneously, lists the first appearance of a micro-world as Tales of Suspense number 13 from 1961. The story it's referring to is a simple yarn titled When the Earth Vanished. It begins on a distant planet with a barbaric race known as the Goloks. After testing powerful new explosives that could easily level mountains and possibly even destroy a planet, the Goloks turned their attention towards conquest, and of course their first target was the Earth. As they approached the planet at incredible speeds, the clouds were too thick for them to see, but their advanced instruments allowed them to land safely. The ship sent out a protective explosive screen, after which the Goloks disembarked, firing wildly in every direction. But when the smoke cleared, the invaders could see nothing but a barren, featureless landscape that extended into the horizon. The Goloks came up with theories about what had happened to the humans, but the entire planet appeared to be merely a smooth, white sphere. With the empty world having no apparent value, the invading aliens decided simply to destroy it. However, with the Earth's different atmosphere, their bomb detonated faster than anticipated. The Golok ship was hit by the shockwave and badly damaged, falling out of the sky. At the exact same time, a young human boy witnessed a very peculiar event. His ping-pong ball suddenly burst into flame, and a small flying insect was caught in the explosion. It seems the Goloks weren't quite as large and powerful as they'd suspected, at least not when compared to the Earth. Now, this story was published shortly before the Marvel Age of Heroes began with the appearance of the Fantastic Four, but of course there would also be stories featuring the concept of micro-worlds in a superhero setting. In an early encounter with the Fantastic Four, the villainous Dr. Doom intended on employing a reducing ray against the heroes, but when the machine was accidentally turned on him, he seemingly shrank away to nothingness. He then landed in a peaceful micro-world, which he then decided to conquer. Doom also developed a method of using his size-changing ray on members of the FF from the micro-world, randomly shrinking them and returning them to normal size just to torment them. Unaware of the cause, the four consulted with the size-changing superhero Ant-Man. This, of course, was the original Ant-Man, Dr. Hank Pym, who discovered the subatomic Pym particles used in his size-changing chemicals. While not exclusively so, Pym particles are perhaps the most commonly used method for shrinking and growing objects and people in the Marvel Universe. Using Pym's formula, the heroes followed Doom down into the micro-world and defeated his forces with help from Ant-Man. This story also featured the first appearance of Princess Pearla, who later became Queen and appeared several more times in stories set in the Microverse. Another important character from a micro-world is the villainous Psycho Man, who first appeared in Fantastic Four Annual number 5 in 1967. Psycho Man originates from the realm of Sub-Atomica, which he himself described as a cluster of microscopic worlds. This, it turns out, is actually a bit of a misconception, but we'll speak on the true nature of Microverses shortly. In this initial story, when Sub-Atomica was in danger of overpopulation, Psycho Man decided to find another world to conquer and set his sights on, you guessed it, the Earth. To this end, he constructed a human-sized suit of cybernetic armor he could pilot, as well as a control box that could stimulate negative emotions in others like fear, doubt, and hate. His initial plans were thwarted when he came into conflict with the Black Panther, the Inhuman royal family, and half of the Fantastic Four. While Psycho Man retreated back to Sub-Atomica, the FF soon encountered him again when they made their own trip to the Microverse. This time they were pursuing the Silver Surfer, seeking his help in saving the Earth from his former master Galactus. And indeed, Mr. Fantastic and his teammates reached this space by shrinking to microscopic size. But despite sometimes being referred to as inner space, the Microverse is not actually a subatomic world that exists within the molecules of our own as was once believed. In truth, it's a parallel dimension that one can access through the technology of shrinking. The simple explanation as to how that works is that if one shrinks enough, they will eventually drop into a Microverse. A more full explanation of the physics involved relates largely to the energies associated with shrinking. Specifically when the atomic particles of a given piece of matter are pushed closer together. Under most circumstances in which an object shrinks but retains its proportions and relative density, it's because the excess mass is being shunted off to an extra-dimensional realm. For example, when a person or object changes size using PIM particles, they hyperphase with particle-suffused mists in the dimension of Cosmos. If you've read a lot of classic comics or you're just a long-time viewer of the channel, you might just recognize Kosmos as being the home planet of the alien creature, later identified as Pearla, who the Wasp battled alongside Ant-Man in her very first appearance. Well, funnily enough, the dimension containing that planet is also the source of PIM particles. When a subject uses these particles to shrink, excess mass is shunted off into the Cosmosian mists and is stored there until they reclaim their full size. Conversely, when one grows larger using PIM particles, the subject will draw in additional mass from the mist to maintain their shape and relative density. Now, you may be wondering how all of this relates to microverses if they aren't literally microscopic universes as the name implies. When a subject shrinks past a certain microscopic threshold, the energies generated by the size-changing process, combined with the atomic compression, will actually cause the subject in question to be displaced through a dimensional nexus, shunting them off into a parallel space which we then perceive as a microverse. Now, it should also be noted that indeed there were once many disparate microverses in separate dimensions. But at one point, another villain from the Microverse, Baron Karza, joined forces with Thanos in an attempt to destroy all of them. Ultimately, this scheme was thwarted by the X-Men and a group of heroes called the Micronauts, who we'll certainly talk more about later, but the battle resulted in a massive surge of energy that merged every subatomic realm into one singular Microverse. Well, almost everyone. The amalgamated Microverse doesn't actually include Underspace, which is an extra-dimensional realm that is another step removed from Sub-Atomica and the other Microworlds. To put it simply, if you visualize the Microverse as being beneath the universe, then Underspace is the dimension below that. By that same token, there are additional layers of reality in the other direction as well. While the Microverse is a realm that can be accessed by shrinking, one can shift into the Macroverse by growing. And even further beyond the Macroverse is Overspace, a realm where abstract entities like Eternity and the Living Tribunal reside. On the subject of Macroverses, I should also clarify that residents of the Microverse will often refer to the Earth dimension as a Macroverse, since from their perspective it is. But before we get too far off the rails, let's take a look at some microworlds that may or may not have been separate realms but are now part of the greater Microverse. We already mentioned some early examples like the Atom world of Mita and the home planet of the Goloks. There's the world of Princess Pearla, later Queen Pearla, which has since been identified as Mirwood. This was the first microworld visited by Doctor Doom, the Fantastic Four, and Ant-Man. In the same dimension of Mirwood is the neighboring planet Tak. This was home to a race of lizard warriors and their leader, Zorak. These worlds may also be part of Sub-Atomica, the cluster of 5 planets that includes Tron, the planet that Psycho Man originally came from. Another early microworld is the planet Divaktos, the domain of Timbu Ba. In relation to the scale of his home dimension, Timbu Ba was a 20-foot monstrosity who enslaved multiple worlds. His reign of terror seemingly ended when a rush of water fell from the sky and washed him away. The unexpected source of this flood was a child in the Earth dimension accidentally dripping water onto a model planet. Now, in the original telling of this story, the obvious implication is that Timbu Ba's world was the model planet, but of course the truth is a bit more complicated in modern continuity. There is an explanation though, because this event was apparently witnessed by a scientist named Dr. Michael Craig Stockton, better known as Dr. Nemesis. It should definitely be noted that he has no connection or relation to the mutant Nazi hunter with the same codename. The Dr. Nemesis we're talking about was a criminal who took an interest in size-changing technology and developed a method of observing microverses from the Earth dimension. He noted that the flood which defeated Timbu Ba was actually a freak accident, a random pinhole that opened between dimensions, allowing water dripping onto a model planet to drop into the microverse. It should also be noted that Timbu Ba survived this event and later tricked the alien child Gugum into bringing him to Earth. Another important microworld to mention is the planet Kai, or maybe just Kai, the home of Queen Jarella. The name Kai originally referred to a specific city, but has sometimes been applied to the entire planet for lack of another label. Much of the world is lush and verdant, populated by oversized flora and fauna. The dominant life form was a green-skinned humanoid species with their own civilization. Kai was discovered by the Incredible Hulk after he was shrunk down by the insectoid Cyclop. Now, we really don't have time in this video to go into the full story of Hulk's relationship with Jarella or her ultimate fate, so if you'd like a separate one exploring that topic in more detail and about the planet Kai in general, then be sure to let me know in the comments. I will note that for today, while it was indeed part of the amalgamated Microverse after various microworld dimensions were fused together, the planet Kai no longer resides there. Due to a combination of factors, Hulk's dark son, Hero Kala, was able to transport Kai out of the Microverse and into the Earth's dimension. Of course, neither the planet nor its people fared well after being ripped away from their sun and indeed their entire universe. Conversely, one dimension that didn't start as a microworld but actually became one is a place called Otherrealm. This world is closely tied to the God Stone, which transformed astronaut John Jameson into the Man-Wolf. Once again, long story there, let me know if you want to know more. Whereas the Earth exists in an expanding universe, Otherrealm existed in a collapsing one, which eventually caused it to shift into a microverse. Another microworld that was once visited by the Hulk was Terragonia, the land of Kronak the Barbarian. Like Otherrealm, this was a land of swords and sorcery, but in many ways Terragonia resembled the Earth's Hyborian Age, the time of Conan the Barbarian. Other worlds within the amalgamated Microverse include Karn, where elders like King Timhoep were venerated, the Rainbow Planet, a colorful world that was home to a genetically engineered three-eyed race that fed on the biological energy generated by pleasurable emotions, and Itrium, the home planet of Zib-Ron, one of several individuals from different dimensions to use the identity of Hyperion. I'll note here that the first Hyperion to encounter the heroes of Earth 616 believed himself to be Zib-Ron, but was actually an artificial being created by the Elder of the Universe known as the Grand Master to join his Squadron Sinister. This was because the Grand Master had already encountered the more heroic Squadron Supreme from the alternate reality 712, otherwise known as Earth S, including their own Hyperion, Mark Milton. Now, there is a lot more that could be said about the various versions of Hyperion, the Squadron Supreme, the Squadron Sinister. Let me know in the comments if you want to hear about that, but for now we'll just point out that while the first one we saw wasn't really him, there was, in fact, a real Zib-Ron who did join the Squadron Sinister after Yttrium was apparently destroyed during a battle between Genis Vell and the Sentry when a surge of energy disrupted the planet's axis. Now, while all these various worlds are now contained within one cohesive microverse, before that happened there was a particular microverse dimension that was considered the microverse proper. Somewhat erroneously referred to as inner space, this is the setting of the 1979 Micronauts series. As a fun note, much like the later Transformers and ROM Space Knight comics, Micronauts is technically a licensed book based on an existing toy line. However, like ROM, Micronauts was set squarely in the Marvel canon, with many characters and concepts being created and owned by Marvel. And so while certain character designs and names like Acro-Year and Baron Karza could not be used after Marvel lost the license, others like Arcturus Ran, Marionette, and Bug continued to appear in the Marvel Universe and the Microverse, albeit with their group name eventually changed from Micronauts to Microns. In any event, these three are all characters who could probably have videos of their own as well, so we're not going to get into too much detail on the Micronauts themselves, but let's take a look at the worlds they come from. Arcturus and Mary were born on Homeworld, the Microverse's central planetoid system. Shaped like a linear molecule, this unique planetoid contains different environments and societies in each zone. The first zone contains the Royal City and Palace, whose opulent buildings belie the misery hidden in the darkness of the lower levels. The Industrial Zone is where roboids build and maintain various machines, including the planet's space fleet. Roboids are similarly employed in the Farm Zone, where food is grown not just for the citizens of Homeworld, but ultimately exported throughout the Microverse. The Sea Zone is an oceanic area populated by mermen, but colonists from the First Zone have established their own floating cities there as well. The Dead Zone, despite its imposing name, is simply a cemetery for Homeworld's deceased citizens, while the Primal Zone is an area largely unchanged by time. It resembles Homeworld during its earliest stages of development and continues to be plagued by earthquakes and volcanoes. The Sand Zone contains the Cyanite Desert, home to two warring races, the Centauri and the Aegyptians. This was also the home of the notorious Baron Karza. The Sub-Zero Zone is a harsh frozen region, but is home to a hardy race of hunters in the city of Polaria. Finally, the Jungle Zone contained Antica, home of the Ant People, as well as the Tropica Jungle. Within Tropica is the city of Murthria, where a peculiar race resides. Depending on which stage of life they're in, this species is either referred to as a devil or a fireflight. As a fireflight, they were feminine in appearance and roughly 8 inches in height. When a fireflight dies, it produces a cocoon that then hatches into a newborn devil who quickly matures. While young devils are relatively docile, as they reach adulthood, they grow increasingly savage. In this state, they can be kept affable by songs from the fireflights, but failing that, a devil will eventually combust and die. However, when that happens, a fully mature fireflight will emerge from the ashes, perpetuating a never-ending cycle of life. So that's Homeworld, but there's also the Crimson Planet Caliclac, which is where Bug and the insectivorid race live, along with the Kronos and the Phobos. And finally, there is the planet Spartak, which became home to the Acro-Year after they were driven from their original planet. While formerly farmers, the Acro-Years became a kind of police force for the Homeworld royal family, ruling over other peoples in their name. So that's some of the planets and peoples that live in this particular microverse, but the origins of inner space can be traced back to a group of enormous, enigmatic entities known as the Makers, not dissimilar to the Celestials. From an unknown realm, the Makers watched the births of many universes and observed their progression to entropic death. They decided to design a dimension that would not succumb to such a fate. Using an existing universe as a basis, they endowed their chosen reality with the properties of life, allowing the universe itself to grow and evolve like a living thing. But rather than the fabric of this reality being random, its form was designed to be structured and infinitely renew its own life. They designed the Spiral Path Galaxy, arranging the stars into a pattern resembling a DNA spiral. And within that galaxy, they connected numerous planetoids into the shape of a linear molecule, endowing them with the power to counteract the gravitational forces that would normally tear such a configuration apart, and enabling the structure to sustain the miniature suns that orbited around it. It was this unusually structured series of planetoids that would be collectively referred to as homeworld. Now, the population of the Spiral Path can trace their lineage to an alternate future, reality 7414. In this timeline, a group of men explored beyond the edge of the galaxy. Whatever it was they found transformed them both physically and mentally, and they became known as the Ha-Min. Carving a swath of destruction in their wake, they reached the human colony on planet Ithacon around the year 17,000 AD. The sole survivor of this massacre was the royal Prince Wayfinder, who then journeyed to find the legendary Sword in the Star. During this quest, he briefly encountered Rocket Raccoon on a planet known as Witchworld, so make of that what you will. He did eventually find the weapon he sought, and while it granted him power, it also took away his eyesight, forcing Wayfinder to rely on a deeper form of vision. He then gathered together a group of wanderers from scattered universes, and after defeating the Ha-Min, led his people through time and space to Earth 616's Mesozoic era. But 1 million years ago, they were beset by a new threat, the energy-draining World Demons. With his people threatened, Wayfinder harnessed the power within the sword, the Enigma Force. Becoming something more than human, the prince froze the world demons in place and opened a portal to the Microverse where he and the Wanderers escaped. While the energies of the Enigma Force were then dispersed throughout the Microverse, Wayfinder became a manifestation of that force known as the Time Traveler. The Enigma Force is also responsible for generating the Unipower that transforms individuals into the mighty Captain Universe in times of need. Now, because the role of the Makers was unknown to many for some time, it was once believed that Wayfinder was responsible for creating the Microverse. Now, he did apparently create the space wall around the Spiral Path, which prevented the Microverse from merging into the Earth dimension. But it has been said that his journey into the Microverse was facilitated by the Makers. Wayfinder's people, the Wanderers, were incredibly diverse, but all contained the building blocks of life in their own genetic codes. Thus, these people were used by the Makers to populate the Spiral Path, bringing meaning to their creation. In their eyes, the people of the Microverse would be champions of life, and throughout subsequent generations, the denizens of the Spiral Path would come to worship the Enigma Force, generally unaware of their true origins. The Spiral Path was not the only creation of the Makers, however. Beyond it, they also forged a confluence of stars, one of which became known as the Dreaming Star, due to its psychoactive nature and ability to absorb mental impressions from nearby beings. To bring life beyond the Spiral Path, the Makers also created immense beings to seed other worlds. These so-called Children of the Makers accomplished this by spawning eggs which hatched into genetically diverse life forms. Known as prime beings, these new organisms seeded their respective planets in different ways. In some cases, creating mates to produce their own spawn with, while in others they dissolved their essence into the oceans so that new life could evolve. Not every prime being was willing to sacrifice their own existence, however, and one of them used her shape-shifting ability to escape her own world and traveled the Microverse under the name Solitaire. But one of the races that was created outside the spiral path became known as the Children of the Dreaming Star, and they worshipped the Makers. While the spiral path was separated from other realms by the space wall, one people, known as the Way of Greatness, created a way to pass through it. Reportedly having ruled 10,000 races for 10,000 years, the Way of Greatness built a massive structure called the Breach Point. Powered by entire stars, this construct allowed transport from one side of the wall to the other. Now, in some regards, we've really just scratched the surface when it comes to the Microverse, but we are out of time for today, and I think we've touched on a lot of the basics. If you want to know more, maybe someday we'll dig into the lives of the individual Micronauts. But for now, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, it's time for another question of the week. As mentioned earlier, technically Micronauts is a licensed property, so this week's question is this. What is your favorite comic book property that's based on a toy line? Is it Transformers, G.I. Joe, ROM Space Knight? Let me know in the comments. But that is indeed all the time I've got for you this week, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share the video, and subscribe for more marvelous content. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page where for only $1 a month you can get your name in these special thanks here. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!